All right, so today we're going to be comparing data using box plots, or box and whisker plots, they're mostly known as. And the success criteria, so what you'll be tested on is, can you represent data using box plots? Can you calculate things like the IQR, the mean, the median, the range for a set of data? And can you determine which measurement is better for measuring spread versus measuring center? Here's a video that talks about box plots if you want them explained a little bit differently, but then again, I am recording, so you can always watch this recording later in the daily slides. And I don't know that we'll have time to do the puzzle piece in class, but it's not a whole lot of questions. It might be like 5 to 7 questions at most about box plots. The quiz for Module 6, which we started yesterday, is scheduled for this Monday. So just prepare yourself for that. Any questions? All right. So starting with the one that says measures of center and spread. You need to fill in this part that's highlighted, that's blank on your paper. So measures of center, those are usually used to represent a typical value. So a typical value in a data set. Measures of spread are to show how consistent the values are to each other. So are they close together? Are they spread out? So that's what spread means. And those are usually represented by range or interquartile range. So fill in what's highlighted that is blank on your paper. All right, now on your homework, I know it says like, well, what happens to the mean of the data when we take out this point, or what happens to the median when we take out this point? Well, I didn't see anywhere in the online lessons that it really explained what each of those mean. I think it just assumes that you already know. So let's just review it. So starting with the mean, that is also known as your average. All right, so your mean is going to be the average of the values. All right, there's a formula for it. So mean, which is also known as your average, so AKA average, is going to be the sum of the values. So the sum of the numbers divided by the number of values. Oops, I don't know what happened. All right, so the mean is mean. It makes you add up all these numbers and then divide it. So that's usually how people remember it. So it's always sum of all the values divided by however many values there were. So if there was 10 data points, 10 things that you had to add up, then you're dividing by 10. If there's only 3, then you're dividing by 3. So it can be different for each data set. All right, the median, what does that mean? The middle number, good. All right, I know a lot of you don't drive yet, but the thing in the middle of the road that separates the traffic going opposite directions is called a median. So in math, it's going to be the middle number of the data set. All right, what about mode?
Isn't the outside?
Up the outside.
The line.
Not the largest number. Smaller? No. The most. Thank you. Mode is going to be the most common number that you see in your data set. So let me find a way to summarize that. So the mode is the most, so the most occurring value. So the most occurring value in your data. You can have more than one mode. So mode is the most occurring value. All right, lower extreme is basically a fancy way of saying what? The smallest number. So the smallest value. I usually call it a minimum. All right, lower extreme, smallest value, minimum number. The upper extreme would be, what do you think? Good. Biggest, largest. Opposite of minimum, which is good. All right, we have a couple of new ones which you may or may not be familiar with, but are very important, especially for the box plot lesson. So we have lower quartile, which is going to be my Q1. So I would write that next to lower quartile so that I know. And then I have upper quartile, which is Q3. Anyone know what Q2 would be if I can? We'll get to Q2 a little later then. So lower quartile will be the median of my lower half. So upper quartile would be opposite. It would be the median of, good. So median of the upper half. And so if it's my lower quartile is Q1, my upper quartile is Q3, and they both have to do with median, well then my Q2 would be not the interquartile, it would just be my median of the whole thing. All right, it'll probably make more sense once we get to the box plots, why they're numbered the way that they are. But lower quartiles Q1, upper quartiles Q3, the median will be your Q2. I would have these written right next to those. All right, questions about this upper set of vocab? All right, now let's talk about range. Do we remember what the range is? What is it?
The difference between
So
like how many years?
It's like how much it is.
Yeah.
it's like if my data set starts at 0 and ends at 50, my range is 50 minus 0, right? So my range is 50. So it's going to be your maximum value minus your minimum value. That tells me like what my data set starts from and ends from, or like how much the data set goes to. So like maximum minus my minimum is going to be my range. And then the interquartile range has to do with my quartiles over here. So that's going to be my upper quartile, my Q3, minus my lower quartile, which is Q1. All right, so the range, you're going to be subtracting. Range of the entire thing is maximum minus minimum. Interquartile range is like subtracting your quartiles. Questions? All right, so we'll just do one example on this page just to kind of apply some of this more specifically, like the mean, median, and mode. You'll get a lot of practice for like the quartile stuff on the box plot notes. All right, but scrolling down, we'll do this example. We have a data set, and we need to identify all of these things given this data set. Now, before I do anything, what do I want to do? Anyone know?
See how many.
You put it up for
Good. Always put your data in numerical order. I know some things you can probably identify without putting it in numerical order, but it'll make your life a lot easier if you just do it to begin with. So always put the data in numerical order. Take like 30 seconds on your paper and do that. All right, usually when I'm done counting a number or putting it in my list, I underline it so that I don't recount it. All right, and then just double check to make sure you included all the data points. All right, so if I started with 10 data points, I need to have 10 data points in my list. All right, so compare your list to mine, make sure you didn't leave any out. And we'll start from here. We'll start with the mean. So for the mean, what do I have to do?
Put them all together and then divide them by the amount of numbers.
Good. So probably use your calculator for that. All right, so add up all your numbers. So sum of all numbers divided by what? Divided by 10, which is the, good. So when you added them all up, what did you get? Good, and then we said there was 10 data points, so I'm going to divide it by 10. So add them all up, divide by the number of things that you added. So then 130 divided by 10, what is that?
13.
So my mean is 13. Because it's just a rule. It's just a formula for mean. That tells me that a typical value in this set is near 13. Right, and it kind of is. All right, next let's talk about median. So my median is my middle number. So I'm just going to kind of underline on each side until I get to the middle number. Now, whenever I have an even number of data points, what ends up happening is that I have two numbers in the middle, don't I? So what do I do in that case? Do I have two medians? So I have to take the average if I have two middle numbers. Because I can't list 10 and 14 as my median. I have to find the middle of those numbers, which is like finding the average. So add them together. Good, and divide them by the number of things you added. So what goes on the denominator? So 24 divided by 2 is 12. So 12 is my median. All right, if you have an odd number of data points, it's really easy because you only have one number in the middle. But when you have an even number of data points, you take the average of it. All right, good. Questions on that? The mode is going to be my most occurring value. So what's the most occurring value? All right, good. We see 10 3 times. We don't see any number 3 times or more than that. So the mode will be 10. Now, can I have more than one mode?
Yeah.
Yes. If I had another 4 over here, then my mode would be 4 and 10. All right, but we don't have a 4 there, so the mode is just 10. All right, questions on mean, median, and mode? All right, now what would my lower extreme be? 4, good. So your minimum value. My upper extreme would be
25.
good, my maximum value. Since we just did those and range has to do with those two values, we'll do range next. Formula for range is what? And we said the maximum value is, the minimum value was, so my range is, all right, good. People always forget the range. I know it seems silly, but people always forget it. All right, now let's talk about these lower quartiles, upper quartiles, and interquartile range. So lower quartile is my median of my lower half. So we know the median is 12, which goes right down the center of 10 and 14. So my lower half would be like to the left, the lower numbers. What is the median of my lower half? It is 10. 10 is that middle number. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
Because it's the median of your lower half of the data. So just looking at this side, the median is 10. Think to yourself, don't say it out loud. Think of what your upper quartile would be. Don't say it out loud. Question? Yeah, Veronica. All right, what's your upper quartile? All right. So there we go. Almost done. We just have interquartile range. So IQR, what's the formula for that? And we identified our Q3 and our Q1. Q3 represents what? Good, so 16, and Q1 is, so 16 minus 10 is, so our IQR is 6. All right, good, any questions? Yes?
How is it 16?
So we identified the median of our upper half. That's what the upper quartile is. So the upper half is like this side of the dotted line. Just underline until you get to a middle number. And we get 16 as that middle number. All right. So any questions? All right, normally I give you a your turn, but we do have more practice on the box plot, so I'll kind of skip the your turn. But are there any questions on just like the vocab, what each of them means, how we find any of them? All right. So now look at the notes that says box plots at the top. So the other one that you picked up today, the packet, comparing data sets, looking at box plots specifically. Box plots are also called box and whisker plots. All right, but you're going to see a lot of them on your homework. And a good way to interpret them, to be able to interpret them, is to practice making them. So we're going to make some box plots. And in order to make box plots, you need to have 5 values identified in your data, which I will explain. The first value that you need is going to be your minimum, or your lower extreme, or your smallest value. I also need my maximum, or your upper extreme. The other 3 values that I need are going to be Q1, Q2, and Q3. So what does Q1 represent?
Lower. Yeah.
The lower quartile, or that kind of doesn't tell me much of what it means. So I would also write median of the lower half. All right, what does Q2 represent? The median of the entire data set. All right, Q2 is the median of your entire data set. Q3 is my upper quartile. And I'm a little bit out of room, so I'm going to put an arrow over here. Or you could say median of your upper half. All right, and then those 5 values are what I need to make a box plot. Once I've identified those 5 things, so just identifying them is the hardest part. Making the box plot is really easy because then I just have to put on my number line, because you make them based on a number line. Yes. Upper part. All right, so once you've identified those 5 values, I just put a dot where my minimum is, where my maximum is, and then where my Q1, Q2, and Q3 go. So your 5 needed values will make you 5 dots. Only the dots in the middle will have a vertical line through them, and that will make your box. All right, so you connect them. That'll make your box right here. Your whiskers are what you get when you draw the line from your box to your minimum and maximum. That's why it's called a box and whisker plot, because it looks like a box with whiskers. All right, they love to use these on like the AZ Merit and what else? And just on tests in general. So just knowing what those 5 values are and how to find them, you'll be set. Questions? All right, so let's do one together. So example A, we have a set of data, so a number of runs scored by a softball team in 20 games. First step is always to order the data from least to greatest, sorry. So that's what they did here. I figure you guys are pretty good at that, right? All right, so we did that for you. Step 2 is to identify the 5 needed values. So what are the values that I need? What's my minimum? Good, so that's one of my needed values. What else do I need? Which is
14.
good. What else?
Median.
The median. I would do the median before I do like my Q1 or Q3. So find the median on your paper. Don't say what it is yet. I usually will just underline until I get to the middle number or middle 2 numbers. So because I have an even number of data points, we were looking at 20 games, I should have 2 numbers in the middle. Does that mean that they're both my median? No, I need to take the average of them. So we're going to add them together and divide it by what? Because that's the number of things we added. 7 plus 8 is 15 divided by 2 is
7.5.
good. So it's going to be basically the number in between them, 7.5. So my Q2 is 7.5. Questions about that? What's another number that I need? So my Q1 I need, and I'm going to put a dotted line where my median goes, which is right in the middle of these 2 numbers. And my lower half, I'm going to find the median of. So what's the median of my lower half? Well, I have 2 4s in the middle. Take the average of them. So 4 plus 4 divided by 2 gives me 4. Good. I can save you some time if the 2 numbers in the middle are the same. It's just going to be that number. If they're different, you can go through the trouble. All right, now take a couple seconds and find your Q3. Don't say what it is yet out loud, though. Find it on your paper. All right, what is my Q3? Good. Any questions? All right, so that was the hardest part. So if you thought that was pretty easy, then hopefully the rest of this is pretty easy. Because now that we identified those 5 needed values, I'm going to plot them on a number line. And I'm not going to put it directly on the number line, I'm going to put it above it. So I have to plot a dot at the 2, because that was my minimum. At the 4, because that was my Q1. At the 7.5. At the 10. And at the 14. Which ones will get a vertical line through them? Look at your diagram up here. So the Q1, Q2, and Q3, or in simpler terms, the middle 3 dots will have a vertical line through them. That'll make your box. Your whiskers, you get from connecting the box to your minimum and your maximum value. And we get something that looks like this. Any questions? All right, so then would you say that this looks mostly symmetrical or like very asymmetrical?
Mostly symmetrical.
Mostly symmetrical. That'll be more important for your homework. It'll say like, what's the best measure of center and spread if it box plot looks like this. And that's like the last page of your notes. We'll fill in that table for you to figure out. All right, questions? I'll leave this up so that you have a reference, but I'll have you try one. And it's going to be where it says your turn on page 2 in your notes. So that your turn number 1 on page 2. You're going to make your own box plot, and then I'll project it to see if you made it correctly. Your box plot should look like this. All right, so what is the minimum value? My minimum value is 15. So that's where my first dot went. My maximum value was what? So that's where my last dot went. All right, right here. Then my Q1, Q2, and Q3 are plotted like so. So the median of the entire set was what? 25. And because we had 10 data points, that means we had 2 numbers in the middle. So just take the average of them. That's 25 for your Q2. All right, what did you get for your Q1? All right, 16, because you put a dotted line down the center and find the median of your lower half. Only 1 number in the middle this time. So that's my Q1. And then your Q3 is what? 26. So that is my Q3. Questions about that? Alrighty then. So another thing that you need to be able to do, so we made box plots, that really shows that you understand them. On your homework, you're mostly just identifying parts of the box plot. So looking at the one that's right above it, right above your turn, example C. It says, given the box and whisker plot, identify these 5 things. Lowest value, highest value, bar range. All right, so let's start with the first thing it asks for. What's the lowest value? 14, and you know that because it's your first dot, right? So my lowest value is 14. What's my highest value? 29. So your last dot is always your maximum value. My IQR, so that one has a formula. What's the formula? And how do I know what my Q3 is based on this plot? It's 24. So if you want to like write into yourself, it goes Q1, Q2, then Q3. So we have 24 for Q3. What's my Q1? And 24 minus 15 is not 16. If my IQR is Q3 minus Q1. 24 minus 15 is 9. Right, so that's my IQR. So my IQR is 9. How do I determine the range? What's the formula for the range? So plug that in. My maximum value we said was minus the minimum, which is, so my range is going to be 50. All right, so my range is 15. And then what is my median? All right, I heard someone say 16. How did you know that? Because the median of the entire data set is always Q2, or the dot that's right in the middle. Well, not right in the middle, but the middle of the 5 dots. All right, so Q2 for median. So my median is 16. Question? All right, I'll save the your turn for your homework because I don't want to talk you to death. We're almost done. I want to give you time for your puzzle piece. Looking at this box plot, would you say that it's mostly symmetrical or mostly asymmetrical? Definitely asymmetrical. When I look at that middle dot, on the left it's like really close together, on the right it's like really far apart. So I would say that it's mostly asymmetrical, yes. When asymmetrical. All right, so the reason why I mentioned that is because I know on your homework it does say, you know, based on this dot plot, or not dot plot, box plot, what's a better measure of center and spread? So I have some vocab on the last page to help you with that. So measure of center and spread down here. So a typical value in the data set is going to be center. All right, a typical value would be like your measure of center. So 2 measures of center are mean and what else do you think? Median. So like center, like the center of your data. So median, for sure. And then mean is also another way. Spread is different. It's how far spread out your data is from each other. So the variation of the data. 2 measures of spread. One we talked about today a lot, which is IQR. And one that we haven't talked about yet is called standard deviation. All right, standard deviation we would probably need to spend a whole day on, because it's a long process. All right, but both IQR and standard deviation will tell you how spread out your data is. So like having a big standard deviation means your data is really spread out from each other. They're not close in value. Having a small IQR or standard deviation means that they're really close. So if the shape of your box plot is basically symmetrical, then you're going to want to use, let me just make sure before I tell you. You're going to want to use the mean if it's basically symmetrical. For spread, you would want to use standard deviation. All right, you won't be asked to find the standard deviation on your homework. It'll just say, if it's symmetrical, what's a better measure of spread? Now, if it's mostly asymmetrical, then it's probably best to use your median to tell you a typical value in the data set and your IQR. That'll give you better information based on the shape of your data. All right, any questions? All right, so the puzzle piece is in Schoology 6.02. You can even do the 6.01 from yesterday that we did not get to yesterday. The puzzle piece of 6.02. Yeah. All right, if you have questions, let me know. We have like 17 solid minutes, so I couldn't see anyone talking